In a world ruled by emotion, where reason is abandoned, God is forsaken, and history forgotten, two brave men will attempt to do the unthinkable. Use their brains. Armed with ancient wisdom, they will bring light into our modern world. This is the Sons of Antiquity Podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Sons of Antiquity Podcast. I'm your host, Evan, and I'm joined in the studio by my co-host, Daniel.
What's going on, guys?
Today, we'll be talking about Anacyclosis, also known as the cycle of governments. You'll learn what that is if you don't know. Here's what we'll be covering in today's episode. 1. How did I first discover this theory? Then, what is anacyclosis? There's facts about the Greek scholar Polybius. Quotes from Polybius explaining anacyclosis. What are the 6 forms of government in the cycle, and how does the cycle flow? 3 ideal forms of government and 3 corrupted forms. Examples of anacyclosis in history, specifically Rome, Sparta, and Athens. How has anacyclosis affected America? What can we do to slow the cycle and preserve the republic? And of course, we'll wrap the show up with this week's hot takes. Before we dive into our main topic, since this is the very first episode, we'd like to take a moment to talk about the podcast itself, how it came to be, and what we have planned for the future.
So, this podcast, Sons of Antiquity Podcast, to me really started off at the gym, but I know there was something that happened before that. And correct me if I'm wrong, Evan, I believe it was at dinner, right?
Right.
We were out with the wives, and the topic came up of, us always discussing politics like we've been doing really for the last 8 years, maybe, at least since high school. I mean,
Right.
It goes back a ways. And so they said, hey, jokingly, you guys should do a podcast. And, we kind of laugh, haha, that's pretty funny. But then we started thinking, okay, maybe we really could. And so we started going to the gym. And at the gym, in between sets, we'd say, hey, man, what do you think about this? What do you think about this idea? And that's really where we got the ball rolling. And everything just kind of fell into place from there slowly, of course, with the pandemic. And I was working out of town. But when everything kind of came together, it resulted in this podcast you're listening to right now.
And I will say we are groundbreaking in that we're 2 white males who started a podcast.
Yeah, I mean, you have never heard anything like this before.
Yes.
Guaranteed. So, as far as what this podcast is about, what it is really in my mind, I've always thought of it as a learn with us type of deal. Obviously we are not experts in very many fields, but we are deeply interested in so many different topics, and we know that there are people out there who are interested in those topics also and are wanting to be a part of a community that will share information and really try to build a better understanding of history so that we can in turn understand what's going on right now. That's the goal.
We hope it won't be dry as if we were some real academics.
Yeah.
So we're trying to add some flavor to serious topics that will benefit your life.
Oh, yeah, you'll get some of that flavor later when we get to the hot takes segment, that's for sure. But where do you want this to go? How far do you want this to go, Evan?
I think we just need to see where it goes and see the response we get from our thousands of fans.
Oh, yeah, they're lining up already, yeah.
Okay.
One step at a time, really, you're saying, one step at a time.
Yeah, it's just bringing old topics or things that have been around a while and trying to apply them to the modern world to better your own life, either through knowledge or practical, through practice in your life.
Absolutely. So to get into the meat and potatoes, really, of this episode on anacyclosis, let me ask you this. How did you come across this idea in the first place, Evan?
Well, it's pretty funny. I first gained interest in this theory when my previous girlfriend let me borrow her copy of Machiavelli's Discourses on Livy. I read a good amount of it, but then I made the wise decision to break up with her. And unfortunately, I had to give it back, even though I kind of tried to hide it.
So did she come after you and try to get it back?
She was like, "That's my book." Okay.
She must have
You're
really
right.
liked him.
No, I think she just wanted it back.
Oh, she wasn't
So
a big Machiavelli fan?
No, she just loaned it to me. I think she had to read it in high school or something. Anyways.
Interesting.
But you will be happy to know I recently acquired a used copy of the same book and read a lot of it for this episode.
Oh, okay. So it worked out. You've got your own.
Yeah, it took, many, many years, but I have it now.
Well, right on. So let's ask the big question. What is anacyclosis?
Anacyclosis is a theory of cyclical political evolution, which explains the transitions of governments from rule by the one to rule by the few to rule by the many, then back to the beginning. It's otherwise known as the cycle of collapse because of the tendency for nations to go through war or major social upheaval during the transitions. This theory was conceived by the philosopher Polybius, a Greek historian and scholar who lived from 200 to 118 BC.
So let's go over some facts about Polybius. He is famous for his work, The Histories, which covers the rise of the Roman Republic as it came to dominate the Mediterranean region. Polybius was even an eyewitness to the sack of Carthage in 146 BC. Imagine being there in person and seeing that. I mean, incredible. Absolutely incredible to think about what this guy saw and what he witnessed. And as we'll learn, that really helped him shape his theories. He was heavily influenced by the works of Plato and Aristotle, whose writings on politics from 200 years earlier really shaped his understanding of government. Polybius was interested in defining an ideal and balanced form of government, like the Roman Republic or the Spartan constitution created by Lycurgus, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Lycurgus, both of which incorporated elements of kingship, aristocracy, and democracy. And this pursuit led him to the theory of anacyclosis. His musings on the separation of powers and ideal forms of government inspired the American Constitution nearly 2,000 years later. Now, how Polybius explains anacyclosis in his own words is what we're going to cover next from the Histories, Book 6. So this is his own words. Now, it is undoubtedly the case that most of those who profess to give us authoritative instruction in the classification of polities on these subjects distinguish three kinds of constitutions, which they designate kingship, aristocracy, democracy. But in my opinion, the question might be fairly put to them whether they name these as being the only ones or as the best. In either case, I think they are wrong. For it is plain that we must regard as the best constitution that which partakes of all of these three elements, nor can we admit that these are the only forms, for we have had before now examples of absolute and tyrannical forms of government. Polybius goes on to say, so then we enumerate 6 forms of government, the 3 commonly spoke of, which I have just mentioned, and 3 more allied forms, I mean despotism, oligarchy, and mob rule.
Now, Daniel, as you mentioned, there are 6 forms of government in the cycle. There's 3 good and 3 bad, kind of an alter ego for each. First, you start out with monarchy. That goes to tyranny, which becomes aristocracy. Then plutocracy, which is the rule by the few and wealthy. Then restricted republic is established, which turns into a democracy. And that kind of develops in number 6 is also mob rule and anarchy, because democracy always leads to those other 2. And then the chaos, a monarchy, is reestablished. So let's go in more in detail for each of these steps. Going from monarchy to tyranny, there is a king. He has a strong personality who rules effectively and relatively fairly. With absolute power, his line corrupts. Their rule becomes less about their subjects and more about their own gain. They may begin killing powerful rivals. And a little addition, I remember from reading Aristotle's Politics that he has a story. There was a king he had a philosopher on his
court.
In his court, and the king says, "What do I have to do to maintain my rule?" And the philosopher had a sickle, and he went out to they were walking through a field or something, and he cut off the top of the tallest pieces of or tallest plants.
Oh yeah.
Saying you need to level off the people who are above their station. So those who are trying to get too much status or money or power,
you cut them down.
You cut them down, level them with the rest of the people.
Of course, I mean, a king has to maintain, order underneath him. Otherwise, they may overthrow him.
Yeah, and well,
we'll get to that.
Yeah. Okay, now going from tyranny to aristocracy, the king's despotism and persecution of the rich and powerful, because that's the most efficient, causes them to band together in a conspiracy. They depose the king and establish themselves as rulers. They tend to be good men, brought together in times of trouble for a common good. They also tend to be wealthy and use some of their wealth for the rest of the people in order to secure legitimacy and goodwill. That's the virtue of liberality.
Virtue of liberality.
Yeah, and magnanimity, kind of the same thing. But going from aristocracy to plutocracy, you can see where this is going to go.
Mm-hmm.
Rich people tend to be intelligent and influential, even their sons, because they get good educations, and they become greedy for power and more money as time goes on, and they remember less about freeing themselves from tyranny.
Yeah, that's a point that Polybius brings up, explicitly, that, the reason that we see degeneracy over time is because the hard-won battles these are not things that the younger generation and newer generations experience. And so they don't have the same frame of mind, and they take for granted what's given to them, whether it's status as a king or status as a rich aristocrat. Yeah.
That's true. They use their positions to accumulate money through corruption. Some aristocrats will rise up to defend honesty and fairness, but they will be stopped by the majority of the aristocrats because, in general, most people desire their own selfish interests.
Absolutely.
Virtue of selfishness.
That's a can of worms there.
Okay. Going from this plutocracy to a restricted republic, a larger group of citizens rebels against the unfair rule of the few and establish themselves an assembly where policies will be voted on. The phase can either happen through gradual increase in suffrage, as a way to appease the people, or through rebellion. Suffrage is restricted to land-owning males, or that's called a timocracy, most likely. And republic to democracy, the suffrage inevitably increases until it includes most people. Economic status is no longer a qualification for voting. There may still be some restrictions, such as in the past, men only voting, or you have to hit the age of being considered a full adult, or slaves or felons can't vote. But most people gain the vote by the time they're middle-aged. Democracy turns into mob rule, where people vote in order to secure their own interests. Because if you have a responsible person who wants to have a balanced budget and not spend all the money like just bribing everybody, versus the person who says, I'm just going to give you some free bread. Who are the majority of people going to vote for? The virtuous people will vote for the responsible one, but it's easy to vote for more stuff for yourself. Yeah,
it's the path of least resistance.
Yeah, and that's the majority of people. The majority of people will vote for what the majority wants, and that's their own interest. Groups will form to secure these goods. The groups are not based on positive traits like virtue or opinions on policy, but identity politics, usually.
Sounds very familiar.
Yeah, it's crazy. Often races, ethnicities, religions, nationalities stick together. When society is diverse in these ways, this inevitably leads to violence. The lack of central values leads to anarchy and violence. And the lack of public order leads to a public desire for it. People like order because it leads to prosperity. Chaos is not good for business. So a powerful, capable figure steps up to restore order to the land. Call him what you will, dictator, Napoleon, whatever. People are willing to give up so-called freedom, which at this point is not real freedom but licentiousness, for stability. A king rises to power and the cycle begins anew.
Imagine that, all the way through that cycle, and we're back to the beginning.
It's all a circle, man.
So let's talk about some of these specific forms of government, the 3 absolute or good forms of government, and the 3 tyrannical or bad forms. So the absolute, monarchy, aristocracy, and republic. Polybius considers these forms to be more pure and more just, but also more unstable and more prone to collapse into their more degenerate forms. Now, why do you think he viewed them as unstable?
Because they don't account for all of human nature or every class of people. It's favoring one group of people over the other groups. So since everyone seeks their own interest, to an extent at least, people don't like just constantly being on the losing side if they can help it. See, yeah, that's why.
Okay, so maybe because in a monarchy, being the king or in the king's court or whatever is so exclusive, or being part of the aristocracy is so exclusive, or even having control within the republic is so exclusive, it makes people feel like, hey, I'm a loser. I'm not a part of the in crowd.
Also, just the fact that when you have power and other people don't, and you don't have checks on yourself, then you're more likely to take advantage of it. Maybe not at first when you're a good guy who's restoring the people to a form of peace.
Yeah.
You might have virtue if you're the first or second line, but after a while, your spoiled sons are just going to realize that they want booze and women.
Yeah.
And not, and they don't want to learn about your boring virtue.
Yeah, they don't want to sit on your lap when you're some old geezer talking about your war stories. They want to pursue their own ends and
get
like
money.
You said, booze and women. So then there are the tyrannical forms, which degenerate, from the absolute. So you have tyranny, plutocracy, and democracy. Polybius argues that these forms of government are the result of degeneracy taking hold within a nation. For example, to illustrate the difference between democracy and mob rule, Polybius says, "It is not enough to constitute a democracy that the whole crowd of citizens should have the right to do whatever they wish or propose. But where reverence to the gods, succor of parents, respect to elders, obedience to laws, are traditional and habitual, in such communities, if the will of the majority prevail, we may speak of the form of government as a democracy." So right there, he's making a important distinction between the two, the absolute versus the more tyrannical versions, the degenerate versions, are really separated by how good the people are. Are the people good? Are they virtuous? Then they will create a virtuous nation. If they are not so virtuous, they will create evil, tyrannical versions of their forms of government.
But the thing is that within every person is good and bad possibility. So just assuming that one group of people is going to always be good is destined to be wrong.
Oh, of course, of course. Yeah, people change, demographics change, and there is evil within all of us. You're right. So by this, Polybius argues that the will of the majority is simply one factor which can define both democracy and mob rule. The true difference between the two is a cultural one. In an absolute form, a nation which governs by majority rule, while also upholding certain moral codes, religious doctrines, and traditional customs, would be considered a democracy. On the other hand, a nation which governs by majority rule but does not follow such customs is doomed to enable corruption, leading to abuses of power, persecution of the minority, and general mob rule.
All right. Polybius may not have been able to conceive of Anacyclosis or provide evidence for its existence, without using Roman history as a case study. He tells us, quote, "No clearer proof of the truth of what I say could be obtained than by a careful observation of the natural origin, genesis, and decadence of these several forms of government. For it is only by seeing distinctly how each of them is produced that a distinct view can also be obtained of its growth, zenith, and decadence, and the time, circumstance, and place in which each of these may be expected to recur. This method I have assumed to be especially applicable to the Roman constitution, because its origin and growth have from the first followed natural causes." A surprising source, as I alluded to earlier, is Machiavelli. He echoes the sentiments of Polybius and offers insight into Rome's government, as well as the governments of Sparta and Athens, in his Discourses on Livy. Here are some quotes which sum up his analysis. And by the way, Discourses on Livy refers to the volume book set that was written by Titius Livius.
Oh, whoa. Good
Yeah.
insight.
Thank you. He was personal friends of Caesar Augustus. He lived in the same time as him.
Whoa, talk about name dropping.
Yeah, he died during Jesus' lifetime, 17 AD, I think.
Wow. And so,
He was kind of the court historian. That's why he got into history.
yeah, and so Machiavelli's writing about his observations and his records.
Machiavelli brings in like his analysis also of Italian history that
Okay.
he's living through. This was pre-Italian unification, so he's talking about all the different, little city-states like Venice and Florence and all that.
And this was important to him because he was Italian.
Yeah, he was from Florence.
Florence. Great city.
Yes, has many of the greats, like my boy Dante.
Oh, yeah.
Alighieri. Okay, so here are some quotes from Machiavelli in regards to Titus Livius. Quote, "For a monarchy readily becomes a tyranny, an aristocracy an oligarchy, while a democracy tends to degenerate into anarchy. So that if the founder of a state should establish any one of these three forms of government, he establishes it for a short time only, since no precaution he may take can prevent it from sliding into its contrary, by reason of the close resemblance which, in this case, the virtue bears to the vice." So they're sides of the same coin. Here's a detailed description of the Anacyclosis. But presently, when sovereignty grew to be hereditary, no longer elective, hereditary sovereigns began to degenerate from their ancestors, and, quitting worthy courses, took up the notion that princes had nothing to do but to surpass the rest of the world in sumptuous display and wantonness, and plots and conspiracies against him, undertaken not by those who were weak or afraid for themselves, but by such as being conspicuous for their birth, courage, wealth, and station, could not tolerate the shameful life of the tyrant. The multitude, following the lead of these powerful men, took up arms against the prince, and he, being got rid of, obeyed these others as their liberators, who, on their part, holding in hatred the name of sole ruler, formed themselves into a government, and at first, while the recollection of past tyranny was still fresh, observed the laws they themselves made, and postponing personal advantage to the common welfare, administered affairs most publicly and privately.
So what you're describing right here is the overthrow of a king and the rise of a aristocracy, basically.
Yeah.
Right here.
Right.
Okay. So this, I mean, he's going play by play,
Yeah,
right in line with what Polybius had said.
right. Yeah, they all go along the same thread. Even this thought even goes back to Aristotle's Politics.
Mhm.
It was in a infant form back then. It wasn't quite in the cycle form. He was talking about the different types of governments and how they go bad. Polybius is the one who really brought it together and made it a cycle. Administered affairs both publicly and privately with the utmost diligence and zeal, but this government passing afterwards to their descendants who, never having been taught in the school of adversity, knew nothing of the vicissitudes of fortune, these not choosing to rest content with mere civil equality, but abandoning themselves to avarice, which is greed, ambition, and lust, converted, without respect to civil rights, what had been a government of the best into a government of the few. By the way, just interrupting myself,
Sure.
I just absolutely love the way he said, they never having been taught in the school of adversity.
Yeah, that sounds very familiar. I think a few people that we know personally and a few people around the country could stand to learn a little thing or two from Machiavelli.
Yeah. I just love the expression, never having been taught in the school of adversity.
Maybe we should incorporate that into the social media. We'll do something with that. I do really like that quote too.
It's almost, people talk about the greatest generation in America because they were forced to go through the Great Depression and and World War II.
Yeah, it's
So
no surprise.
They were schooled in the school of adversity.
Yeah, exactly.
So that was their life. Adversity. When you go through adversity, it tends to garner, good qualities.
Oh, absolutely.
Whereas we live in a time where, I don't know if I know many people who are even in the military, because most people are sheltered from it, including us. We've never been.
Yeah, that's true, including us. I know, a couple, but
it's rare. It's not like you one out of every two men has been in the military.
certainly not like in generations past. Yeah.
Anyways, oh, let me finish this.
Sure.
And so very soon the plutocrats met with the same fate as a tyrant. They had recourse to a popular government, which they established on such a footing that neither king nor nobles had any place in it. So let's kick out the nobles. No kings either.
Yeah, get them out of here.
Get them out. This government also lasted for a while, but not for long. That's the funny part of this quote. He says, it lasted for a while, but not for long.
What do you mean?
It's seldom after the generation which brought it into existence had died out. For suddenly liberty passed into license, wherein neither private worth nor public authority was respected, but everyone living as he liked. 1,000 wrongs were done daily, whereupon, whether driven by necessity or on the suggestion of some wiser man among them and to escape anarchy, the people reverted to a monarchy.
And there we are. We find ourselves at the beginning once again.
Yeah, and very quickly, just the history of Rome, Rome going through all this. Is
Sure.
They started out with the 7 legendary kings of Rome, which is suspicious. Most historians don't really think that those were the only kings, because each one had an average reign of like 30 or 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to believe it because I'm a believer, you know.
I bet you also believe that Gaius Marius found, 7 eggs in...
I like stories like that, okay?
in a bird's nest.
I like the stories of omens.
I mean, it's a
they
cool
just add so
story.
much spice to history, you know?
It does. You're right. I mean, it's cool to think, what if there really were 7? Maybe it means something. And, thinking back on it, I mean,
Maybe.
Rome was pretty impressive, so maybe.
And there were I think there are 7 hills in Rome, too, so it makes sense that they would have, a symbolic 7 kings. But it started out with the famous Romulus, who the city is named after. Over time, there were 6 more kings. They alternated between liking war like Romulus and liking peace and religion. Like the second king, I can't remember his name right now, but he basically created the Roman religion. So he's responsible for turning them from just a warlike people to more civilized, having more customs.
So he just ran over to Greece and just copied and pasted and just brought it back?
I think they already knew about him.
Oh, and I mean, I don't even really know the origins of the Roman religion. I just know that it's all based.
He brought more
similar to
piety
Greece.
to the people, and he established the priesthood and temples and stuff.
Oh, okay.
Anyways, it alternated between that. But then the last king, I think he raped a nobleman's wife.
Hashtag me too.
Yeah, for real. And I think she killed herself in shame. So then the aristocrats got together, the rich men, and they threw out the king. He was expelled to another part of Italy. And that established the Roman Republic. And then that went well for a while, and they actually had to incorporate the assembly of the plebs in order to placate the majority of people.
To keep them from overrunning and destroying everything, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But then the Republic started falling apart, and the first emperor, Caesar Augustus, not Julius Caesar.
Yeah, he was just dictator for life, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, there were a few of those.
There were a couple.
But, starting a little bit in the BC times, I think it was 30 BC, something like that, Augustus Caesar became the first emperor, thus bringing it back to the king phase.
Mm-hmm. Where it remained for centuries.
Yeah, because people always hate the idea of reverting to a non-democracy, but they don't call it the Pax Augusta for nothing. The Peace of Augustus really brought 100 years of prosperity to the whole empire.
Well, the proof is in the pudding there, I guess.
Yeah, it's not always bad. They weren't doing good before, obviously. Okay, here's another quote from Machiavelli. I say then that all these 6 forms of government are pernicious. The 3 good kinds from their brief duration, the 3 bad from their inherent badness. Wise legislators, therefore, knowing these defects and avoiding each of these forms in its simplicity, have made choice of a form which shares in the qualities of all the first 3, in which they judge to be more stable and lasting than any of these separately. For where we have a monarchy, an aristocracy, and a democracy existing together in the same city, each of the 3 serves as a check upon the other.
Wise words.
Yes, wise. Another quote on the stability of a balanced constitution. Among those who have earned special praise by devising a constitution of this nature was Lycurgus, the famous Spartan founder, who so framed the laws of Sparta as to assign their special proper functions to kings, nobles, and commons, and in this way established a government which, to his great glory and to the peace and tranquility of his country, lasted for more than 800 years. The contrary, however, happened in the case of Solon, who by the turn he gave to the institutions of Athens, creating a democracy, created there a purely democratic government, of such brief duration that he himself lived to witness the beginning of the despotism of Pisistratus. Athens, as compared with Sparta, had but a short life. Now, Rome formed an excellent government over time. Here's another quote. And although the kings of Rome lost their sovereignty in the manner and for the causes mentioned above, nevertheless those who drove them out, by at once creating 2 consuls to take their place, preserved in Rome the regal authority while banishing from it the regal throne, so that as both Senate and consuls were included in that republic, it in fact possessed 2 of the elements above enumerated, to wit, the monarchic and the aristocratic. They were forced to concede a share to the people, the assembly of the plebs, while with the share which remained, the Senate and consuls retained so much authority that they still held their own place in the republic. In this way, the tribunes of the people came to be created, after whose creation the stability of the state was much augmented, since each of the 3 forms of government had now its due influence allowed it. And lastly, for the quotes from Machiavelli, there are advantages of the Roman institution of the dictatorship. Quote, we find, accordingly, that while the dictatorship was conferred in conformity with public ordinances, and not through personal influence, it was constantly beneficial to the city. The dictator was not created for life, but for a fixed term, and only to meet the emergency for which he was appointed. For without some such safeguard, a city can hardly pass unharmed through extraordinary dangers.
I had a quote from Lycurgus from way back. Not only, I mean, obviously he is from way back, but I had a quote saved in my phone that I saved years ago, and I should have put it in there. It was a really good quote, and I wish I had it. And I don't even know why I brought this up, but I just wanted to say that I'm sorry, that I missed a golden opportunity to give you a good quote there. But maybe I'll find another place for it.
Maybe you should cut that part out.
No,
Okay.
I think I'll leave it there. Maybe it'll end up on social media or something. Look for it. If you're listening right now,
This is
look for it.
the golden radio right now.
It's golden. It's golden. You know, I'm not ashamed to admit my mistakes. You know, and that was a mistake. I should have included in the notes, and I'm sorry. But we forge on. Let's talk about how anacyclosis has affected America. If we apply the theory of anacyclosis to the United States, we can see that certain events and cultural shifts throughout its history align with the cyclical changes predicted by Polybius. Let's review some of them. The first one we will review is the underrated significance of the 17th Amendment. Before the 17th Amendment, senators were chosen by state legislatures, not the people of the state. They selected the best people from their state so that the state could be proud. This made it less populist and more aristocratic. With the passage of the 17th Amendment in 1913, the Senate just became the House with longer terms and more formal rules. It eliminated the aristocratic element from the federal constitution, and this means that the federal government has been too populist since the progressive era, about the early 1900s.
Now, what is the actual difference between the Senate and the House? Do you know anything else?
Well, other than
Like
the size. I mean, obviously, the size is different. The Senate is 100, 2 per state, and then the House is done by population.
Yeah, 435.
Yeah, that's what we're up to right now. Yeah. And, of course, there are different rules, and I am by no means an expert, and I am not too familiar with all of the ins and outs and all the rules. But, of course, on certain issues, a law must pass through one house before it can pass through the other. I mean, it's not like they're voting on it at the same time. And sometimes, depending on the political, which political side has control of which one, it may spell doom for a law, or it may mean it'll shoot right through it. So, yeah, there are some differences, but definitely that amendment really made them more the same than different.
Yeah, what's even the point? I think here's a little bit of mini hot take.
Okay.
I think students are lied to about the difference between the Senate and the House. they're taught that we have two different houses to account for the different sizes of states. The Senate is better for smaller states, and the House is more for bigger population states. Like, so Rhode Island loves having like their equal representation
Sure.
in the Senate, but the House is good for like Texas.
Yeah, I can see that logic.
They use that logic, but that's not the original purpose of making them so different. Otherwise, why would they be elected differently?
This is true.
That might be one reason. And they call it I don't know, it's like the Virginia plan versus the Sawmelts plan. But it's not the only reason that they were different like that.
Yeah, and I will admit, yes, that's not covered in school.
No.
And that's a very important issue, and it should be really fleshed out in at least, civics class. But I don't really remember even talking about that.
Because, when you go through public school, you're just it's almost indoctrinated in you that you have to advocate democracy in every case. But sometimes, non-democratic elements are added to constitutions for good reasons. Like, they weren't just elitists who didn't want the plebs to vote.
Yeah.
They had reasons for making the House more democratic and the Senate less democratic.
Yeah, and those, we've obviously covered those. It's for checks and balances.
Yep.
It's to make a more balanced form of government. Excellent point there. Our second point here is the changes in population characteristics have increased the speed of the cycle in America. Imagine a static society in which ethnic makeup, education level, literacy, economic mobility, average age, all of these things never changed. It's safe to assume that most laws, regulations, voting patterns would not change drastically. Therefore, the system of government would change very little. Change of population and the cycle will continue. Increased immigration to the United States and the broadening of civil rights to include all demographics have both changed the nature of the government. The republic is moving ever closer to democracy. Some might even say it's already here. This was also observed in ancient Rome during the struggle over the question of Italian citizenship. This was not the only factor which led to the drastic changes in the Roman government, but it is a significant one, which aided in the erosion of the republic and the ultimate slide toward democracy, the rise of the Caesars, and the despotism of later emperors. Anything you want to add on that one?
No, you covered it.
All right. Technology is another factor that has really impacted the cycle. Harder to observe in the ancient world due to the slow pace of advancement, but consider the impact the printing press had on the Enlightenment and the American Revolution. Rise in literacy, the distribution of reading material, and propaganda increased interest in resistance to Britain and the tyrannical monarchy, if only among wealthy land-owning whites, the people who controlled politics and therefore the cycle at the time. The Industrial Revolution empowered the lower classes and raised the standard of living. This fueled the progressive movement, leading to women's suffrage, the growth of the social programs that are still around today, and later the civil rights and LGBTQ+, I don't know the rest of the letters, movements. Granted, these demographics, like women, the poor, African Americans, alphabet people, a louder voice in politics, and a greater hold on the direction and the speed of the cycle. And the internet, more than maybe anything else, has made nearly all knowledge accessible to nearly all people. It has changed the cycle drastically, and it has simultaneously armed all people with the tools of misinformation and distraction. This has bred extreme division and politicization of nearly all aspects of daily life. These major cultural shifts have sped up the trend toward a more mob rule style of government. And religion is another factor. As Polybius explained, much of what leads a nation to stray from an absolute system of government and adopt a tyrannical one is cultural degeneracy. The cultural norms and traditions which are the backbone of a society must be maintained, otherwise corruption will grow. The Enlightenment era and its focus on pure reason gave birth to widespread skepticism and agnosticism in intellectual circles, which persisted throughout the 18th and 19th centuries, culminating in the horrors of the 20th century as nations rejected religion in favor of secular belief systems. America has also seen a decline in religious observance, which has hastened the decline of the republic. Religion acts as a unifying force. Without it, groups are bound to unite around other beliefs, creating division.
So, how can we slow the cycle and preserve the republic that we have? In truth, the cycle cannot be stopped completely. It is a sociological force outside of any one person's control. But the real question is, how do we slow it down? Strict constitutions, balanced mixed governments, having all three governments incorporated into your government structure, avoiding drastic social change, avoiding demographic change, preserving religion and traditions, or you could just move to a commune like an Amish setup.
I didn't notice that was in the notes. I like that. You could do that, and that would be a perfectly reasonable thing to do these days. So many people are moving to, compounds.
The Benedict option.
Yeah.
Ancient Rome is an example, as we said. The dual consulship is the monarchical element. The Senate is the aristocracy, and the assemblies are republicanism. For the U.S., the presidency is the monarchical element. The Senate was aristocratic, and the House is republican in nature.
So what are our takeaways here? Anacyclosis is a natural, unstoppable force of human nature. It can be slowed through vigilance, education, and well-thought-out government structures. A change in the cycle usually produces violence and chaos, especially in the era of mob rule and the final transition back to kingship. And America is currently in the mob rule era, or very close to it. And it's not outside the realm of possibility that we will see a rise in violence within our lifetimes, maybe, dare I say, a rise of a Caesar. Who can say?
Who can say? So where do we go from here, Daniel?
Well, it's safe to say we'll stay on the cycle for a little bit. The merry-go-round will continue. Does it show signs of slowing down? I don't think so.
No.
I think, if anything, it shows signs of speeding up.
If anyone's in doubt, we are in the democratic element, or at least entering it.
Yes.
Going from republic to democracy.
Quick question. When do you think was the last time you could have said we are a republic?
I think the progressive era was when it really started to break down.
Do you think even after the Civil War we were still a republic?
Yeah, definitely. I don't see why. Not including the South, who was under military occupation for just reasons, but the rest of the country, I think, was validly a republic. But the progressive era really tried to make everything more democratic in nature. Like we said,
Yes.
The 17th Amendment, but also the 16th, 18th, and 19th Amendments. 16 is income tax, 18 is prohibition, and 19th is
We all love the 19th.
Women's suffrage.
Yes. I'm pro-woman.
Yes. We love women.
We love women on the Sons of Antiquity podcast. We really
Yes.
do. Mm-hmm. Can the cycle be reversed? Is there any evidence of that?
Not permanently. Maybe just Silicon Valley could get together and try to take over the country, but that would be kind of an aristocratic element, I guess, since they're rich and powerful. But I don't think it would last. No,
I don't think so. I think people would reject that. But
as undemocratic. I mean, there are some effects of that, some efforts almost at being Silicon Valley corporations becoming more powerful, but I don't think people would tolerate it as a governing style. If they were overtly getting involved in elections more than they are now, I think there would be a breaking point, not just among conservatives.
I think everybody would be upset.
Like if Zuckerberg ran, I don't think he'd get less support than Michael Bloomberg, I think.
Yeah, and that's saying something. That
He'd
really
probably
is.
try to pay off supporters like in the same way as Bloomberg.
But if he won, he'd be the first lizard president.
There's always a first.
There is always a first. Has that ever worked?
Did you know, by the way, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Did you know Biden is the only silent generation president ever in America? He was the first.
Really?
Silent generation were those born between Greatest Generation and Boomers. So probably like your grandparents are silent generation. Anyways, that's just a fun fact.
No, wait. There must have been, though.
No, there weren't.
Really?
He was people were always saying, oh, there's never been a silent generation president. But Biden was the first to be. He was born in the early 40s.
Okay, so it'd have to be someone born in the
Trump
early
was born in
40s.
45, so he was born in 46.
Okay,
so he was a very
boomer.
he's an old boomer.
Yeah. Like the very first of the boomers.
Yes.
Wow.
Sorry for that interruption.
No. That's a very interesting factoid. I didn't know that. Are there historical examples of reversal? No. I think that's pretty well documented that there
Can't
aren't
go
any.
backward.
Yeah. Does change always entail violent revolution, or can it be done peacefully? Is there any evidence of that?
Yeah, it can be done peacefully. As we mentioned earlier, going from a restricted republic to a democracy, often it's just you're conceding more voting rights to the population. But I will say, oftentimes, especially going from democracy, mob rule to king, that's hardly ever going to be peaceful.
Yeah, or
Kings hardly ever abdicate to like a group of aristocrats. So going from the corrupt ones to the good ones usually is violent.
yes,
I'll say that.
I'd agree.
That's all we have for our main topic today. Now we're going to present hot takes.
It's time for the hot takes.
So the hot takes segment is at the end of every episode, we're going to present the other person with a topic that they do not know in advance and that they might have little knowledge of, but they still are asked to give a comprehensive analysis of it. Thus, a hot take.
Yeah, well, at least Evan will demand a comprehensive analysis from me. I just want Evan to scream and shout and get triggered. So that's basically the bit. So Evan's going to go first. Evan, lay it on me. What's your hot take for this week?
Right, so it was a pretty boring week, but I was scouring through the feed of CNN, the most reputable news source in the country, and I came across an opinion article saying why are late night hosts of comedy, supposed comedy shows, why are they so political? And it went through the history of kind of late night, starting with who was the original guy before Letterman?
I believe
Carson.
Stewart.
No,
Carson.
Going
okay.
back a long time, like Carson, who didn't really get into politics much. He'd make occasional jokes against politicians, but it was never one-sided, and it was never too deep of a cut to be, to get more than just a laugh. It was just kind of like lighthearted fun. And going on to Letterman, who in the beginning was the same way, but then Mr. Jon Stewart changed the game, and he's instead of having it just be for laughs, for entertainment, he said his show was going to be more of an editorial show. So more giving his own opinion and being more serious about topics.
And this was Stewart saying that.
Yeah. He said he was going to take the show in an editorial direction. So he did that, and I guess it really caught on. It was saying like before Obama, they would make fun of everybody. Like they made fun of John Kerry, Al Gore, for inventing the internet, and George W. Bush,
which
of course.
He did.
Yeah, of course. But
everybody knows that.
They would make fun of everybody, but then CNN even admitted that hardly anybody criticized Obama during his time in office.
This is true.
Yeah, but they said it was because he wasn't an easy target and he really was hard to be the butt of a joke. Just, I can see it. But then it said,
I don't know. I think I would contest that, but continue.
But, he didn't have like a bunch of scandals or anything, and like he didn't.
I know at the end of Obama's era, they said he was the most scandal-free president. And that to me is. I disagree with that as well.
Less scandals than Trump had, for sure.
Some of that was artificially
maybe.
concocted.
Scandal doesn't have to be like a real thing. It just has to be what people perceive. Anyways, going on.
Then there you go. Okay, I'll give you that.
And now, like every host on there, like Colbert and that British bloke, whatever his name is.
The Stay Away from My Son.
Yeah,
John Oliver.
John Oliver.
Yeah, so, I'm gonna post that meme on the Twitter feed too.
Yeah. So nowadays it's like all editorial with some jokes sometimes. Like let's see, during the Obama era, I know Colbert would. He would act like a Republican, but a really dumb one, and he would that would be like his character. He would just like make fun of Republicans. But then CNN goes on and says the character of the Trump presidency made it to where it was almost too bad to like make jokes about and just be lighthearted. Like we have to actually attack this dude because we're actually scared for our democracy. So that's why it says we have to attack Trump.
Oh,
in that it's more editorial because more is on the line. What are your thoughts about it? Sorry, that was long, but...
That's okay. It needed a good introduction. I'm going to give it a good answer. And my first inclination is to say that it's no surprise that these people take that view that, oh, we had to attack him. We had to abandon making fun of everything and making light of this because he's such a threat to our democracy. It just goes to show the lengths to which these people would go to just see reality the way they wanted to rather than the way it was. You know, they, based on their own preconceived ideas, had seen Trump walk in and, you know, comparing his ideas to theirs, it struck them as so polar opposite that it shook them to their very core.
And he just attacked the media so directly too.
And he did, yeah. And he didn't lay down, and he attacked them. And so they felt, and it's all about feeling here, they felt threatened. They felt like this guy is attacking us, and he's attacking our democracy. And it was all emotion-driven. And that's, of course, why they acted the way they did, because these people tend to think with their emotions. And I think any rational person who could put their emotions aside could still find humor in those 4 years. And there were people who did. They weren't people in mainstream, but there were people who did. And so either those people are clinically insane, or maybe they're onto something. Maybe if you just put your emotions aside for a minute, you can actually enjoy things and be a comedian.
That's the thing. What happened to comedy? I mean, people don't want to lecture all the time. When they want to watch a lecture, they go to a source that's not a comedy show.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Nobody wants to be lectured in comedy or in advertising or in corporate emails or at school, but that seems like it's everywhere now. That sort of mentality, that talking down to, that, oh, you need to be told what to do, is everywhere. And that's why it's just kind of soured everything. And as to the reason why it's there, it's just ideology. I mean, let's talk about it in terms of the episode. You know, Anacyclosis. It's the change in the people. The people have changed, and they have lost the ability to think rather than they feel rather than think, and it's because they've never had adversity. Fewer and fewer people have been challenged by adversity, because that teaches you to put aside your emotions and really think critically and really get a thick skin. And because people today have such a thin skin, obviously they're going to react in this way, and they're going to think that a molehill is a mountain. And so it's no wonder that people like late night comedy hosts and people in Hollywood are reacting this way. I mean, it's actually kind of sad in a way that it's predictable. You know, it's, if you could step back knowing what we know now and look at it, it makes perfect sense that our generation, you know, young millennials, Gen Z, have ended up this way. It's no surprise, because they've been, you know, they've grown up in front of a TV and they've never played outside, or, I mean, they don't play outside as much. They don't have as much adversity. Everything is bubble wrap for them. So, of course, they're going to act this way. Of course, they're going to put all of this, their politics, into everything.
Okay, boomer.
Yeah, I know. I sound like a boomer. But, hey, if I'm a boomer at my core, maybe that's okay. Maybe everybody needs a little bit of boomer in them. What do you think of that?
I don't agree.
Well, that's my hot take on why these not these news hosts, but these comedy hosts are the way they are.
Just bring back humor. You know, you can have your opinions, but people need to laugh some.
Yeah, and
that's my opinion.
One last thing I'll say on that, or rather I'll ask. Do you think that I didn't mean to bump the mic there.
Oh, that was me.
Oh, do you think that anything is outside the realm of comedy? Like, do you think that are there any golden calves?
I don't know. That's a hard question.
It is.
Hey, I'm the one supposed to be asking you
I
questions.
know. I can't help it, man. That's how I am. I wanna turn questions back onto the question asker.
I think there should be some seriousness with comedy. Like, you shouldn't make fun of starving kids in Africa. You may disagree. You may disagree, but I think there are some limits, like just to decency.
Yeah.
You know, making fun of someone who's husband just died or something,
Yeah.
There needs to be some respect, but
So, like, there are some things that should be no-go.
for the sake of respect,
Yeah. Like the Holocaust or like
Yeah.
9/11.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Okay. Well, that brings me to my hot take story for Evan. Are you ready for this? This is like top-tier tabloid,
Oh, great.
awful. I'll read you the headline from Slate. Chrissy Teigen is a cyberbully. Could it sink her career? Now, do you know who Chrissy Teigen is?
She's married to that singer, right?
Yeah, the dude who looks like Turtle. John Legend. Yeah, who was voted like sexiest man alive, even though that's just complete bogus. There's no way that
I
dude's...
mean, he's not ugly.
He looks like he could be a woman. He's very effeminate. I mean, let's take the beard away. He could be a woman.
Okay, enough of that.
That's my opinion. Hey, no judgment here. And Sons of Antiquity is a judgment-free zone. Wait, that might be trademarked. I don't think we can say it. So let me read you a little bit of this. On Monday, the Daily Beast published an interview with Courtney Stodden, another big famous loser, the reality television star who was a tabloid mainstay after marrying 51-year-old Doug Hutchison at the age of 16. Despite the fact that Hutchison, an acting coach who also appeared in The Green Mile, was undoubtedly the creep in the relationship, Stodden faced intense backlash, scrutiny, and harassment from the likes of Anderson Cooper, Joy Behar, and Chrissy Teigen.
Wait, who's being scrutinized, the woman or the man?
I believe the woman here is being criticized.
Oh.
According to Stodden, Teigen wouldn't just publicly tweet about wanting me to take a dirt nap, but would privately DM me and tell me to kill myself.
Oh.
Publicly, Teigen tweeted things like, "My Friday fantasy, you, dirt nap, baby, and go to sleep forever."
What? That's I mean, that's rough if that actually happened.
It is pretty rough.
Yeah. Wait, what is it? What's the relationship with this lady and dirt? Why is dirt keep coming up?
Dirt nap?
Yeah.
If you take a dirt nap, that means you're laying 6 feet under.
Oh.
Yeah, you didn't know that?
No.
I'm going to make these guys take a dirt nap. Yeah, that's like, I'm going to kill them. Yeah. So I guess my real question here is, do you feel like this is good behavior, especially from somebody who is on the compassionate left? Chrissy Teigen is very, very much on the political left.
Is
if
she?
You didn't know. Yes.
I don't know.
She's very, very outspoken on her Instagram and Twitter, and she supports, mainstream left causes.
I'd like to see proof that she actually told this girl to kill herself.
Well, it said in the article that she publicly said, I guess you would call this a subtweet. I'm getting in touch with my inner boomer here. I believe that's what they call this, where you don't actually at the person, but you just like refer to them. And she says, "My Friday fantasy, you dirt nap, baby, and go to sleep forever."
What did this girl do to Chrissy Teigen?
I don't know. I guess she just really thought that being with 51-year-old Doug Hutchinson was gross. I don't really know if they have any bad blood other than that, but that's just what was on the internet today. And I thought, that's not really nice considering everyone made fun of Melania Trump for trying to be against cyberbullying.
Well, that was ironic.
I mean, I guess it was. But they criticized the president for doing the same thing, And then here they go saying, "Oh, you should kill yourself."
Yeah.
Online.
Assuming that the allegations are true, that's just terrible.
It is.
I mean, it was unwarranted, assuming they don't have any other beef with each other.
I don't believe so. I don't. Maybe I'm not reporting the full story, but it sounds like a lot of people jumped on. Like they mentioned here, Joy Behar from, I think she's on. It's not The View, is it? It might be The View.
I think it's The View.
And then there was Anderson Cooper.
I know him.
Yep. I mean, we know this guy. He's pretty famous. So a lot of famous people having something to say about this woman.
I've been thinking about this a lot. People assume we're huge First Amendment people. I think that's generally true. But
people assume we are?
Yeah.
You and I?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'd say that's true.
Generally, people think, like, people right of center are big fans of free speech, when it comes to, like, bullying people and stuff and other stuff. But imagine if this girl actually killed herself. Let's just, theorize here that she killed herself, a few days after getting that DM. Then I think that Teigen should get a lot more than just, like ruining her career or whatever. If you think about it, what is the status of suicide in law, in our current legal system?
As far as who's responsible?
As I'm saying, are there any legal statutes about suicide?
I do believe that there have been some cases, and I'm not an expert. Don't quote me on this. But I believe there have been a few cases where people have been cyberbullied into committing suicide, and the people who did the cyberbullying, if it was intense enough and could be shown that they had like intent to make this person die, but they were held criminally responsible.
Yeah, I agree with that, because I think actually suicide is illegal in most states.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I mean, people think, oh, that's cruel. Like you try to kill yourself and then it doesn't happen and you go to jail for like not killing yourself. But anyways, if let's say suicide is against the law, then somebody who says kill yourself is encouraging you to disobey the law. So they're an accessory to probably. Oh, I don't know.
Be your murder, possibly. Well, not murder, but
it is self-murder. That's what suicide is.
Yeah. Okay.
So if suicide is against the law, if we concede that suicide is illegal, which I'm assuming for my argument that it is, and that suicide is murder of oneself, then when you tell someone to do it, you are encouraging them to commit a terrible crime that's illegal and immoral. So they should be held responsible. If you actually tell someone, it's like me telling you, Daniel, why don't you just go become a drug dealer? This is how you do it. And then you do it, then I might be held responsible for that.
Maybe. So if this does come to some sort of legal issue, which it might not.
It won't if she doesn't kill herself.
But if she did, and it did become a legal issue, would you be at the courthouse demanding that Chrissy Teigen be put away?
I don't live in California.
But if you did, hey, in episode 0, you were wondering if I lived in California, what would I do? So if you lived in California, what would you do?
I wouldn't publicly protest, but I think it would be justified to put her up for like a manslaughter or something.
Wow.
Some lower crime, maybe third-degree murder. If you think about it, you're encouraging somebody to commit murder.
I guess so. If you hold the belief that it is self-murder, which I guess that's fair.
Literally the origin of the word sui, self, side, kill.
Kill, self-kill. Then there you go. That answers that.
That's my very hot take. Tweet at me about how I hate the First Amendment. But that's what I say. And it's just such hypocrisy with this lady, it seems. I mean, come on. Be nice. Just actually be nice. Don't just say be nice.
Yeah. Be nice, guys. That's all we have for today's show. Join us again next week for even more ancient wisdom and Chrissy Teigen jokes.